So I'm just going to start the recording. So welcome everybody to this month's webinar. Today's session is about protecting your data. So what we're going to cover in today's session is just a brief introduction around the structure of the session. We'll then look at some of the main threats around your data, the main threats to loss of that data, and the forms that can take. Then we're going to look at some things to be aware of and some things to try. And then I'll leave the last few minutes open to some Q&A on today's session. So, brief introduction. For those who haven't joined before, my name is Niall Fahy, and I do the technical training for the support teams here in-house, and I also do some external training for the company as well, to some of our partners. And we do this webinar about once a month for support topics, various support topics. This month, as we said, is about protecting your data. And what we'll look at is, as I mentioned, the agenda there a second ago, and then we will probably take about 20 minutes to talk through that stuff in slides, maybe slightly longer, and then maybe 20 to 25 minutes. And then what we'll do is we'll leave it open to some question and answers at the end about the topic that we're covering today. If you do have any issues around or any questions that you may think of as we're going through, do post them. What I will do is I'll address them as we get towards the end. Okay. So looking at some of the, the threats that are prevalent today, we're looking at some of the traditional threats. So what we're talking about here is theft and accidental loss. Although people don't think about them today, they still really are a major part of talking about protecting your data. So in support here within Mozy, we hear time and time again of people either accidentally losing their actual laptops, maybe with traveling. I've heard many stories myself where when doing tech support previously, where customers have actually even put their laptop on top of the roof of a cab they were about to get into, and the cab is taken off, and there goes their laptop as well. Other things like, theft, burglaries at home, or, from a person's own private car where they may have their laptop stored, to theft inside an office environment. Accidental loss can include, as I mentioned there, leaving a laptop somewhere accidentally, or, accidental damage where somebody can accidentally spill a cup of coffee on top of a laptop or even their desktop machine. And these things do happen, but oftentimes people forget about them as actual threats to their data. Hardware corruptions or failures happen. Okay, hard disk drives of a certain lifespan, like ourselves, they will eventually die, and at any time that could happen. This is why companies go through PC refreshes every few years, but sometimes we fail to take this into account that, here's a disk that I'm trusting all my data to on my physical machine, that could actually at any point just stop working. And it could be for various reasons. You may have a laptop with a hard drive in it that's lasted you, or a desktop machine with a hard drive in it that's lasted you 6 years. But the person sitting next to you may have a computer with a hard drive that's lasted 2 years. There's no real concrete time span to say how long a hard drive will last. Most often on a personal computer, can last anywhere up to kind of 3-4 years. But again, there's no guarantees that it mightn't break. It's like a lot of mechanical things. They can go wrong at times. But we fail to take this into account, and sometimes we may be protecting ourselves against attacks, but we may not be protecting ourselves in terms of the hardware that we're using. Okay. And although we're protecting in terms of hardware or our own environments of that, protecting against attack is good as well. But these traditional threats as well as hardware failures are often overlooked, but they still end up with data loss scenarios. Although we don't take into account too often, and we may forget that. The real big one that people will be familiar with and will probably be used to talking about are the cyber threats. Okay, so I just want to ask a quick question of the audience. You'll see a poll pop up here in a second. So if I just jump out of here. I want to ask the question in terms of cyber threats. So what we're talking about here is anything from, traditional cyber threats to I suppose traditional threats to upcoming to newer cyber threats. So the question is, can anyone guess what it costs on average for companies who were subject to cybercrime in the US last year? So just select one of the options. Okay, and we leave it open for another just 15 seconds. Okay, we leave it there. So yeah, so there's a pretty spread out balance. The most popular options seem to be $500,000 per data breach up to 10 million per data breach. It was actually, it costs an average of $6.5 million per data breach. So when we're talking about cybercrime, and we're talking about in that question in particular, is the overall cybercrime threat. So that's what we're talking about there is threats from both traditional and external or non-traditional, which would be the newer types of cyber threats we're seeing today. So a significant breach not only entails, it's not only just the cost of the actual cyber threat itself, the corruption of the data and stuff like that, but it can typically result in expenses from many different places that we don't take into account. Sometimes, that could be depending on your business. That could be forensic and investigative work, where you have to get auditors in to go through a forensic and investigative research in terms of your organization and how this data breach happened, and to determine the extent of the breach. But also the remediation, legal costs to advise on actions to take, where are we going to go going forward from as a company, how are we going to prevent this happening in future, and often as well to defend the organization in a court case and possibly settle or pay damages. And the main one then as well that, it can be tough to put an actual physical price on is the public relations and brand damage that it does. So that is from the overall, traditional and threats and emerging cyber threats. It cost on average last year $6.5 million per data breach for companies. So that's encompassing absolutely everything from the legal costs that it may incur to the brand damage and so forth. So cyber threats in general then are what we're talking about here is stuff we're used to talking about. Traditional threats like cyber theft and cyber attacks, what their intention to do. So when we're talking about traditional threats, we're talking about that cyber theft or cyber attacks, where the criminal is looking to disrupt and slow down an organization's ability to do business, or an individual user to actually use their computer. So these are the sort of attacks why people invest in authentication softwares, threat protection, and encryption softwares. So types of attacks like these may be things like, where somebody goes in and actually looks to steal data or information, private information, maybe some sensitive information from an organization and use it. Maybe it might be the design of a new product or something along those lines, or other things like where they look to slow down or disrupt the organization's ability to do business, with things like denial of service attacks, where they overload the user's network with calls so that their network crashes. Maybe they go after their website. If it's an e-commerce site, they may go after their website and go after that with so many connections that the website goes down, therefore stopping that's stopping then that company being able to actually do any business. So you can see how these threats can actually disrupt a business and also cost them money. But like everything, those were the traditional cyber threats where they were just looking to steal something, maybe some private information, to the cyber attacks of denying service to a user. But like a lot of things in this life, they criminals are evolving now in the computer age the same ways they probably evolved over the last hundreds of years with different types of criminal activity. Cyber criminals today are changing their game plan, and the emerging threats we are seeing today are cyber destruction and cyber extortion and blackmail. So these new threats are not just interested in disrupting an organization; they're looking to attack an organization's most valuable assets, and that asset really for organizations is data. They look to steal proprietary data, destroy on-site networks or primary backup copies of data to cripple an organization. And they also look to hold that data ransom. So they're looking at techniques whereby they can come into your organization, attack the network, and not only just stop other people from contacting you, but then looking then to destroy or destruct some really important data that's on your network. Maybe that may be the Exchange server on your data. It may be a particular database that you use for R&D, something along those lines, or it can just be for cyber extortion or blackmail. So the second question I want to ask here is if people are, have you heard of ransomware? And if you do you know what it is? So I'm just going to leave that open for about 30 seconds or so. Okay, great. Thanks very much. So yeah, so a good majority of people have heard of it and they know what it is. Some people have heard of it, but they're maybe a bit slightly unsure about what it is and what it does. And some of you as well have not heard of it. And that's understandable because a lot of people haven't. Or if they have heard of it, they may not be 100% sure of what it is. It's kind of one of those buzzwords where people have probably heard it, and they know maybe 50% what it's about, and they may not know, all the details around it. So ransomware is basically just a malware, and what that does is that it infects the computer and restricts the user's access to their files, or it threatens the permanent destruction of their information unless a ransom is paid. And that ransom can be anywhere from hundreds to thousands of dollars. And then even at that point, there's no guarantee that you'll get your data back. So where ransomware is concerned, it seems to be the new kind of emerging threat along with cyber destruction and cyber extortion and blackmail. Ransomware is kind of the main one that we're seeing now because it threatens more people. Obviously, stuff like extortion and blackmail can work for a certain percentage of people. I think that's probably the most well-known one recently enough was the US-based website Ashley Madison, where their database was hacked and their private information was stolen, and they were looking to extort, not only just extort individual users, but they were holding the company to ransom as well. So there was kind of a bit of both extortion and ransomware in that scenario. So in 2016, estimates for the cost of ransomware alone, and I'm not talking about, we're ignoring the other things like the traditional threats where people are looking at, denying your service, or things like even the extortion or blackmail or cyber theft. Just ransomware alone, the estimates for 2016 put the cost to businesses and individuals at roughly around $1 billion. And that skyrocketed from the previous year in 2015, where it was roughly around $24 million for ransomware alone. So as you can see, it is on the increase. And why does it continue to increase? Because roughly about 70% of businesses have paid ransoms to people, to criminals, as they just weren't prepared. They didn't have a proper plan in place to protect themselves against against the threat of a ransomware attack. And obviously then that makes it a lucrative racket. If people can see, okay, well, of the attacks that happened last year of a particular type, 70% of people paid up. Well, if I'm a cyber criminal, then I'm thinking, maybe I should get in on this. So the organizations in general, when they're subjected to a ransomware attack, they're in a very vulnerable position. Obviously, as I said there, if they pay, there's no guarantee that they will receive the proper encryption keys to actually reopen their data, or the criminals have not left open a back door to renew the attack the next day, week, month, and ask for more money. So it can turn from not only just a ransomware attack where it's a once-off payment, but if you pay, there's a chance that the cyber criminal may then decide, okay, well, this person paid relatively easy. I leave the part of the application here so I can reactivate it later on and continue to extort them further. So if you don't pay then, you must have the ability to restore your systems with the current data and without the ransomware vulnerability. So obviously you guys on this webinar are Mozy customers, and that's where Mozy software can actually come in and help a user. So once you've identified the threat and you've cleaned your systems, so you've done a clean install of your operating system on your machine, then you can create a restore from a point in time prior to the ransomware attack on your systems. So Mozy gives you a long retention length for your data, which was just recently in the last just since the turn of the year has been increased for a lot of your, so home users went from 30 to 90 days, pro users went from 60 days to 180 days, and enterprise users went right out to a year. So from 90 days for that was there previously for pro customers, which is 3 months, they went right out to 6 months availability for their data back into the past. So that allows you the scenario where if somebody comes in and installs a ransomware or software like that on your machine, you can then wipe the system, reinstall it, and then you can go about restoring your data from the Mozy services online from a date and time when before the ransomware attack occurred. So if the ransomware attack occurred yesterday or it happened, today, you could go back to your backups from 2 or 3 days ago and restore those files. And you can do that because Mozy's backend is a non-compute environment. So when you upload your data to us, there's no actual actions being taken on that data. So the virus doesn't have a chance to spread on our servers. Okay. So you can see, I suppose, from both cyber threats, traditional threats, and hardware threats, there are a lot of areas where you have to keep an eye on protecting your data. So just let's talk about things to be aware of. Okay, so on your physical computer, obviously to protect stuff like, that we mentioned there, like accidental damage or accidental loss, keeping an eye on where the computer is stored. You'd be surprised. You hear a lot of, obviously being in the support environment, we hear a lot of stories about individuals in terms of their data, and where their machines may be stored sometimes can be a bit questionable, or then as well the age of the computer. Weak passwords is another one you need to be careful of. A lot of intrusions into a person's environment, can happen due to weak passwords. I know it can be a problem to remember all the various passwords, but there are some different softwares out there that you can use, or you can use different techniques for creation of passwords. Weak passwords would be the kind of passwords that you see on the screen. It may seem silly, but people still use these types of passwords. My father probably wouldn't allow me or wouldn't like me saying it, but I had to correct him from using 1 or 2 of these passwords before myself. So, everybody does it, and it's not just older people, it's younger people. It's everybody. People think, oh well, it's only a throwaway account and I can use this throwaway password, but that can be a point of access for a cyber criminal. And you may forget that you use that throwaway account to sign up for something, and then it can be a bounce around effect where you can access your data, your information through various accounts. Things to be very aware of, obviously, then are phishing emails. So this is a big point of attack for ransomware. So things you need to be careful of there is, do you know the sender? If somebody has sent you an email, do you know them? Sometimes, and it gets sophisticated, phishing emails can come and look exactly like an email from your bank, or it could come from an organization where you feel, oh, I know this person, and it must be safe. Also bear in mind that that person's account themselves could have been hacked by using one of those weak passwords. And now they've sent on a phishing email to you, and you think, oh, this is my friend, I know them. Fine, I'll click on that link that they're asking me to do, or download something. If you're unsure and something looks a bit suspicious and it's coming from an unknown email address, obviously then that should be alarm bells ringing. If it's coming from a relatively what looks like a reputable email address, maybe it looks like it's coming from your bank, or maybe it's coming from a friend, reach out to the bank or reach out to your friend or reach out to the account that's requesting you information directly. Call them up, maybe if they have live chat support, have a chat there with them. Check the sender's email address. You can do that in a lot of the email clients. You should be able to check the email address. Sometimes it might look like it's from the bank, but when you open up the full address, it's you can see clearly that it may not be from the bank. Things, a big one at the moment, people may be aware of, even not just individuals, but people are probably working in corporate environments, is the latest email spam Spora. So this arrives and it looks like it resembles an invoice. So it's an invoice request of you or of the organization you may be working for, and it includes a zip file as an attachment. You open up that zip file and it contains an executable that shows you some files that appear to look like PDF or documents. And for users with file extensions so with users who have their file extensions hidden, these actually look like genuine PDF documents. But if you actually look properly at the extension, it might be the doc might be named PDF.hta, or it might be named doc.hta. And they look, although they look, if you only look at the extension, it looks like a genuine file. You open up that and it starts the process of unleashing the ransomware that's within that actual executable file. So these are the kind of things you need to be careful of when you're interacting with your email client, as well as information that's sent to you in various forms. Downloading software from the internet, do you trust the site? You should really be only downloading software from reputable sites. If it's an official site, even better. I would be careful. You might look up something online to download a particular software, and you might be prompted to use a third-party site. I would always look and triple and quadruple check the reputability of that site before I may download something off there. So just being careful of that. As well as that, people using Word or Excel, be careful of macros that are enabled in programs like that, because they can lead you vulnerable to ransomware as well. We're seeing increasingly ransomware being delivered through macros. So the macros that you use inside in Windows or Excel for more interactivity within that software can often lead to attacks as well from ransomware. Public Wi-Fi is another one that needs to be aware of. Again, this is a great way to be accessed by a third party to start corrupting your system. So limit your transactions to what you're doing on that. Be very aware. Don't log into any important sites like online banking or your email accounts or anything like that. That may think of it that if I get into access to your email account, is there anything in there that links somewhere else that might be very important to you? It might be more private information. You may think, oh well, it's only my emails, and it's only all public information really there anyway. But you may then have an email address. You may have an email from the bank. It may be for it could be for another account that's maybe say your pension fund or something along those lines. Anything could be on there, realistically these days. So just be careful when you're using public Wi-Fi, because anybody sometimes, the security on those oftentimes is not exactly very stringent. So I would limit your transactions on those to just the kind of things that you don't mind being public. Maybe you don't mind logging to your Twitter or Facebook account or something like that. Social media as well is one to be careful of, not just in terms of the Facebooks, the Twitters of this world, but also even just in Google searches or on maybe forums that you may use, like say something like Reddit or something like that. There can sometimes be ads on those that are from reputable websites, and you open up those, and then there's clickbait websites in there. Click on here. 10 ways to earn $10,000 sitting in your couch at night, and you click on that. Sometimes those kind of websites can sometimes lead back to stuff that can cause malware threats and these kind of cyber threats. If you're being asked to enter your details in anything, always question it. What are they asking me for? What information are they asking me for? And it goes back to as well to the email scenario, whereby you're being asked to go to your online your electricity provider is asking you to confirm your account details for such and such a thing, and it's been asking you to enter details, and it's taking you to a third party website. So just be careful of that. Also, things like your privacy settings from a theft point of view. So when we talked about traditional threats, privacy settings, people have probably heard this before, but who can see your posts, and what are you sharing in those posts? Are you saying, you post to Twitter or Facebook, Instagram, looking forward to going away on my vacation, and you post a picture of you at the airport? You be careful there. What other information is available on your particular social media account? Is there something that could link back to a post where there was some location services settings used, and somebody now knows that you're going to be on vacation for a couple of days, and your house is going to be empty or your apartment is going to be empty? These are the small things that we have to be careful of as well. So what can we try to prevent and protect our data? Looking at some of those things we've just talked about. Stronger passwords. Don't reuse passwords on multiple sites where possible. Don't share your passwords. If you do have to share your password for any reason, if you need somebody to log into your email address or maybe some account that you use, after they've logged in and they've done what they need to do, make sure the next time you go in that you actually change your password. Try things like like I have on here. So use the password to the right, so the 1DASW0AM, and that translates into the sentence that's in the middle there. I deliver a support webinar once a month. So you can use or create sentences and break those down in whatever way you want into a password which is a lot more secure. So as you can see there, that on the password on the right of the screen there, on the third bullet point, is actually a lot more secure, but it's a simple sentence that I might be able to remember a lot easier. These are useful for things, especially like corporate passwords or account passwords that expire every 90 days or 30 days, whatever it may be. In terms of the hardware issues, just being conscious of the health of your computer. If there's hardware issues being reported, that you just make note of them and you check on them. Antivirus softwares and threat detection softwares can also be very good. Checking the health of the machine, making sure there's not any viruses on the machine, and if there are viruses, that they put them into quarantine. If there's threat detection software, that can be useful as well to actually monitor any potential threats that are coming in against the network. So there are a number of different ways you can protect the health of your computer. So things to be conscious of as well as, in terms of protecting your data is, what are you backing up? So making sure you think about the files that you're selecting for backup and ensuring that you have all the data that you need selected for backup and that you're backing up regularly. It's no harm to check in. Mozy is very much a set and forget software where you can make the file selection and set up your automatic backups, and it will run away in the background. But it's no harm to get into the habit of just checking back in with it every 14 days or so, just to make sure everything is running smoothly, or set up some email alerts in the admin console or from your account online to set up any notifications for you just in case any backups don't occur. for whatever reason that may be. It may be something that's, maybe a Mozy issue, or maybe something, a third-party issue on your machine preventing Mozy from running a backup. So no harm to check in it every once in a while. So from an FBI point of view, they recommend in their cyber protection guidelines to back up data regularly, to verify the integrity of these backups regularly, and secure your backups. So securing your backups means backing up to an offsite. In this case, what a lot of you people are doing on here is backing up to Mozy. So in terms of verifying the integrity of the data, it's no harm to run a restore. Try run a restore. If you've never done a restore before with Mozy, why not go about and do one now? Just to test it, so that you know that the data you're backing up is there. And it's better to do it now and see how the process works, so that you're comfortable if it ever should happen. And let's obviously touch wood that it never does happen to you, but it's no harm to be prepared either. And that's, I suppose, what the recommendations from the FBI are talking about. There's a great, for those of you who may be interested, there's a great 4-part blog on ransomware that gives additional information about some of the stuff I've talked about. It goes into a bit more detail about, looking at, maybe for those of you who are in businesses, to, talking about education and training for your staff around how to identify potential threats from phishing emails and so forth. And all that's inside in the Mozy blog. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Mozy blog or don't know where it is, what I'll do is I'll send out the links for that 4-part blog with the recording of this session. So you don't have to worry about that. I'll send it out with the session. So I'm going to open up to questions now. I know we've had one or two come in as I was talking. I hope I haven't. So, quick question. The virus has no way of spreading on your server. Can you explain this? Yeah. So Peter, so our backend. So Peter's question is that I mentioned a virus has no way of spreading on your server. Can I explain this? So unlike your desktop or laptop, the servers that we use to back up the data, there's no actual compute. It's a non-compute environment. So that means that we don't run any actions on the files. So it's almost like cold storage. For one, if the easiest thing to think about is that it's like cold storage. Your files go up, there's no activity around them, and there's no life around them, so they just sit there in almost like stasis, waiting to be returned to you. So by doing that, if by chance you were to upload a file to us that was corrupted, nothing would happen to that file. It would have no way of spreading, because it wouldn't be run. What happens when you say download a virus or something like that? Some action has set it off to run. So it can be you interacting with it, or it was at the point of download. So once you downloaded it, there was a program there that said once it's downloaded, run. Whereas that action doesn't happen when it's backed up to our servers, because it's a non-compute environment, and there's no actual option to run the file when it's on our servers. I hope that answers your question, Peter. So another great question, actually, Peter. Yeah, so does using a VPN in a public Wi-Fi environment protect you from the dangers that I mentioned? It does, to an extent. I would still, it obviously does a lot more so than you would be on a general public environment. And the advantage of that as well is that you're accessing your private network, so you're accessing all the security on that as well. It just depends on the extent of the strength of the VPN. But if it was, say, you're using a corporate VPN, yes, it's going to be an awful lot more secure, because there's probably a lot of thought gone into the security around that VPN. Okay, and for those not familiar with it, the VPN is just a virtual private network. It's you will be logging into your private network that would have additional security on it. And so I hope that answers your question, Peter. Great. So are there any other questions that people may have had? If there's maybe something that I have covered that people were not sure about or would like me to go back over, and maybe if there was anything I mentioned that you would like me to go back over or discuss again, please just let me know. Or if there are any questions on anything else that we covered, just pop them into the question box there, and I'm happy to answer them. For if anybody who doesn't have any questions and you're happy enough with what we've covered here, thank you for taking the time to attend. I know it's time out of your day, and I do really appreciate people joining. I will be sending on the recording after we get this hosted on our community, and I'll send out the links to the blog as well that I mentioned there towards the end of the session. And be sure to watch out for the invite for our next webinar, which will be at the tail end of May. And that will be coming out in the newsletters towards the end of May. So you should probably see that about a week before the actual scheduled date for the end of May, which is always the last Wednesday of the month. Okay, so are there any other questions, or maybe any questions on some of the stuff we covered? What I'll do is I'll just give it another minute or two there and see if people have questions, and if not, then we'll wrap up today's session. Okay, so there doesn't seem to be any more questions. I will finish up there for today. I give people back at least some of the time of their morning. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully next month. So have a good day, everybody.